On a pressure-filled morning in New York, the atmosphere outside the federal courthouse was as heavy as lead. Crowds gathered, their shouts rising from two opposing sides. "Protect AOC and deport her," echoed amidst security barriers and the constant flash of camera lights. Inside the cold courtroom, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the young, prominent progressive congresswoman, sat in the defendant's chair. Her back was straight, her eyes fixed forward, but her fingers tightly gripping her knees betrayed the immense pressure she felt. She was accused of threatening violence with the words, "Lay a finger on them. We are going to have a problem," uttered in a moment of rage and now used as evidence against her. At the prosecution's table sat Tom Homan, former ICE director, whom AOC had publicly criticized on national television. His arms were crossed, his face calm, almost cold. For him, this was no longer personal. It was an opportunity to extinguish a fire he believed threatened national security. Behind AOC, a team of lawyers led by the ACLU whispered final words before the trial began. They knew one small mistake could cost AOC her reputation, power, and seat in Congress. When the judge struck the gavel, the sound echoed like thunder. All eyes turned to AOC as the trial began. Not just a trial, but a battle. In the stifling courtroom, fluorescent lights shone down on the prosecution's table, where Prosecutor James Whitaker stood, his black suit gleaming like a sharp blade. With a deep, cutting voice, he began his opening argument, each word striking at AOC's position. AOC, sitting a few meters away, maintained a resolute expression, but her hands tightly gripped a pen, ink smearing onto paper, as Whitaker launched his attack. "Your Honor, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has far exceeded the boundaries of free speech," Whitaker declared, his gaze sweeping the audience before settling on AOC. She not only directly threatened Tom Homan, a law enforcement official, but also incited against the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, endangering national security. He held up a tablet playing a video from AOC's X account. "In it," her voice rang out full of fury, "if they dare touch any of the Congress members, there will be serious consequences." Whitaker paused, letting AOC's words hang in the air. "This is not a political warning. This is a threat of violence, a clear violation of Title 18, Section 875 of the United States Criminal Code." The audience murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in dissent. AOC leaned to whisper to her lead attorney, Elena Martinez, from the ACLU, her eyes flashing with anger and anxiety. Martinez placed a hand on her shoulder, signaling her to stay calm. Whitaker pressed on, his voice rising and falling like a stage actor's. "Furthermore, the defendant has organized public workshops encouraging illegal immigrants to evade ICE, violating Title 8, Section 1253. This action not only obstructs the law, but undermines the efforts of individuals like Tom Homan, who has dedicated his life to protecting this country." Whitaker stepped closer to the witness stand, holding a stack of documents. "We have reports from ICE documenting the arrest of 27 Tren de Aragua gang members in New York, thanks to the work of Mr. Homan and his team. Meanwhile, AOC stands with lawbreakers, using her position as a congresswoman to challenge order." He turned to AOC, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "She calls it congressional oversight, but we call it deliberate chaos." AOC bit her lip, struggling to stay composed. Martinez scribbled notes, preparing a rebuttal, but Whitaker wasn't done. He moved to a large screen displaying an X post by AOC following an incident at the Delaney Hall Detention Center. The post read, "ICE must not be allowed to abuse its power. We will not let them trample our communities." Whitaker pointed at the screen. "This is not a call for unity. This is a call for resistance, undermining law enforcement and directly threatening Mr. Homan. Tom Homan, seated on the prosecution's side, sat upright, his gaze sharp as a blade. He nodded slightly to Whitaker, as if confirming everything was on track. Whitaker portrayed Homan, with over 3 decades in law enforcement, as a symbol of dedication. "Mr. Homan is not just a victim of a threat," Whitaker said, his voice thick with emotion. "He is at the forefront of the fight to protect our borders, to protect the very communities of Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. Yet she responds by calling him a coward on social media. This is unacceptable behavior from a congresswoman." Whitaker paused, letting the audience absorb his words. He stepped closer to the judge's bench, his voice lowering but carrying weight. "Your Honor, the defendant's actions go beyond mere words. She has fueled a wave of resistance against ICE, making law enforcement officers feel threatened. The consequences of her actions are not only legal, but moral. We request that this court consider referring this matter to the House Ethics Committee, where Ms. Ocasio-Cortez's conduct could lead to her expulsion from Congress." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Some spectators clapped, while AOC's supporters jeered. The judge banged the gavel, demanding silence, his stern gaze sweeping the crowd. AOC felt her heart pounding as the threat of an ethics investigation loomed like a dark shadow. Elena Martinez, AOC's lead attorney from the ACLU, stood, her eyes sharp but calm, contrasting the prosecutor's aggression. The courtroom fell silent, save for the rustle of papers and whispers from the audience. Martinez adjusted her glasses, her voice clear but lacking the intensity needed to shift the tide. AOC sat behind the defendant's table, hands clasped, tightly, trying to mask her unease. "Your Honor," Martinez began, her tone steady. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez's statement was not a threat of violence, but a political statement protected by the First Amendment. She was fulfilling her role in congressional oversight, protecting New York's 14th District immigrant communities from ICE abuses." Martinez held up a stack of documents to emphasize her point. "We have reports from human rights organizations documenting deplorable conditions in ICE detention centers." Representative Ocasio-Cortez was speaking out for her constituents. However, Martinez's argument lacked persuasiveness. She cited legal precedent, referencing Watts v. United States 1969, where the Supreme Court ruled that a threat must be specific and direct to be unlawful. Representative Ocasio-Cortez's statement, "There will be serious consequences," was political rhetoric, not a call to violence, Martinez stressed, but her voice failed to sway the skeptical audience. Martinez pivoted, attempting to attack Homan. "Tom Homan and the Trump administration are using this case as a political tool to silence Representative Ocasio-Cortez," she said, her voice rising but still lacking fire. "They've exaggerated a statement to smear her, while ICE itself has been criticized for human rights violations." She presented a report on ICE abuses, but failed to provide specific details to undermine Homan's upcoming testimony. Whitaker objected, arguing the report was irrelevant, and the judge agreed, directing Martinez to focus on the charges. Martinez's rebuttal faltered. She emphasized that AOC acted in the community's interest, but couldn't produce compelling evidence to counter the obstruction charge. Representative Ocasio-Cortez did not encourage illegal actions, Martinez said, her voice trembling slightly. She was educating people about their legal rights, an action protected by the Constitution. AOC bit her lip, frustration surging within her. The audience murmured, some shaking their heads, sensing the weakness in Martinez's argument. Martinez concluded, her voice softening, almost pleading. "Your Honor, prosecuting Representative Ocasio-Cortez for this statement is not only a legal error, but an attack on free speech. If she is punished, it will send a message that lawmakers cannot speak out for their constituents." She sat down, but the courtroom's atmosphere clearly favored the prosecution. As Tom Homan took the witness stand, his tall frame in a crisp, grey suit exuded authority. The crowd's murmurs faded, giving way to tense silence as he swore his oath with a firm voice. Across the room, AOC sat rigid, her fingers twisting a pen so tightly it seemed it might snap. Martinez whispered encouragement, but AOC's eyes were locked on Homan, who carried the calm of a predator stalking prey. Both understood Homan's testimony could seal AOC's political fate. Prosecutor Whitaker approached, his steps deliberate. "Mr. Homan," he began, voice full of respect, "please share your experience and role in protecting this country." Homan leaned forward, his voice resonating. "I've served 34 years in law enforcement, starting as a Border Patrol agent, later becoming ICE's acting director. Now, as a border official under President Trump, I'm tasked with securing our borders and communities from illegal activities." He paused, letting his accomplishments sink in. "I've faced many threats, but I've never seen anything as reckless as Representative Ocasio-Cortez's words." The audience stirred, some nodding in agreement. AOC clenched her jaw, her breathing quickening as Homan continued. Her words, "Lay a finger on them, we are going to have a problem," weren't just a warning. They were a direct challenge to law enforcement, paving the way for chaos. Whitaker pressed on, holding up a printout of an ex-post by AOC calling Homan a coward. "This post was written right after the threat. How did it affect your work?" Homan's voice grew firmer. "It fueled a narrative that ICE is the enemy. Agents reported increased hostility in the field, with protesters emboldened by her words. She's a public figure with millions of followers, and her words carry weight." Whitaker stepped back, letting Homan's testimony dominate. "Mr. Homan, do you believe her actions constitute obstruction of justice?" Homan leaned forward, his voice unwavering. "Absolutely. By instructing illegal immigrants on how to evade ICE, she violated Title 8, Section 1253. By threatening law enforcement, she crossed a line no public official should cross. Her actions demand accountability, perhaps through an ethics investigation, leading to her removal from Congress." The audience gasped, the word removal striking like lightning. AOC stopped writing, her face paling as she grasped the weight of Homan's words. Martinez stood to cross-examine, but her strategy remained shaky. Homan countered her questions effortlessly, his responses landing like punches. Martinez sat down, her cross-examination ending without impact. Homan stepped off the stand, a slight smirk as he passed AOC's table. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez took the witness stand in a striking navy blazer, her eyes blazing, but anxiety swirling beneath her resolute exterior. After Homan's overpowering testimony, the room seemed to lean toward him. Martinez placed her hopes in this moment, trusting AOC could turn the tide, but Whitaker was ready to set his trap. Martinez began. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez, please. Explain your intent when you stated there would be a problem if ICE officials acted against members of Congress." AOC leaned forward, her voice clear but slightly trembling. "I wasn't threatening violence. It was a statement about political accountability. I meant that if ICE abused its power, my community would respond through votes, peaceful protests, and public opinion." Martinez nodded, guiding her to elaborate on her role in defending her community. AOC's voice grew stronger. "I represent New York's 14th District, home to hard-working immigrant families often harassed by ICE. I visited detention centers, heard stories of deplorable conditions, of children separated from parents. I speak out for them because it's my job to ensure the government doesn't trample on human rights." A few supporters clapped softly, but the judge's gavel silenced them. Whitaker rose, moving slowly like a panther. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez," he began, his voice smooth but chilling, "you claim your statement was purely political, so why use the phrase a problem, which could easily be taken as a threat?" AOC inhaled, striving to stay calm. In that context, I was defending my congressional colleagues from abuse of power. I was emphasizing that ICE's actions wouldn't be tolerated, not through violence, but through democratic accountability. Whitaker smiled coldly, replaying AOC's X video. If they dare touch any of the Congress members, there will be serious consequences. He paused, staring at AOC. You call this democratic accountability or a public call to defy ICE? AOC shook, her head, her voice rising. No, I wasn't calling for violence. I was talking about the power of the community, of voters. Whitaker cut her off, his voice sharp. Are you aware that after that speech, ICE agents in New York reported being threatened, having rocks thrown at them during protests? AOC opened her mouth to retort, but Whitaker pressed on. You called Mr. Homan a coward in front of millions of followers. Do you think that didn't incite hostility? AOC clenched her fists, her voice shaking. I called him that because he targets vulnerable immigrants instead of addressing real issues. That's the truth, not incitement. Whitaker stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper but heavy with pressure. The truth, or were you deliberately undermining a federal agency, encouraging illegal immigrants to evade the law, and threatening people like Mr. Homan who protect this country? AOC felt blood rush to her face. You're twisting my words, she shouted, leaping to her feet and pointing at Whitaker. ICE abuses its power, detains children in horrific conditions, and Homan is behind it all. He's suppressing my free speech, my community's free speech. The courtroom erupted, spectators jeering, some clapping, others shouting in protest. Judge Grayson pounded his gavel, his voice thundering. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, sit. Down immediately. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Martinez pulled AOC back to her seat, whispering urgently, Alex, calm down. You're making things worse. AOC, face flushed and breathing heavily, sat down, her eyes still burning toward Whitaker and Homan. Whitaker seized the moment, turning to the judge. Your Honor, the defendant's outburst clearly shows her lack of control and defiance of the law. This is exactly what we've been emphasizing. He sat down, leaving AOC under the audience's scrutinizing gaze. As the trial paused for a recess, the courtroom doors closed, but a media storm erupted. AOC stepped out of the courthouse, her eyes bearing traces of tension from her outburst. Supporters held AOC is a hero signs, but shouts from an opposing crowd and flashing camera lights overwhelmed them. Tom Homan, with a confident stride and subtle smile, became the focus of conservative media praise, portrayed as a beacon of law and order. Fox News hailed Homan as an unyielding warrior, with one host shouting, Tom Homan stood tall against AOC, exposing her danger. Newsmax replayed AOC's outburst, captioning it, the fall of a radical congresswoman. On X, Homan posted, ICE protects the public despite people like AOC. The law always wins. The post garnered thousands of shares with comments like, Homan is a hero, and kick AOC out of Congress. President Trump chimed in, AOC went too far, daring to challenge Tom Homan. She doesn't belong in Congress. Progressive outlets like MSNBC defended AOC, calling the case an attack on free speech. But their voices were drowned out by conservative fervor. AOC held a press conference, her voice striving for defiance. I won't stop fighting for immigrants, no matter how they try to smear me. But her eyes betrayed exhaustion, and her response to a question about an ethics investigation, I trust my voters, lacked conviction. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harold Grayson entered, his gaze icy, clutching a notebook tightly. AOC, seated at the defendant's table, tried to maintain a resolute expression, but her hands gripped her blazer's edge, her heart pounding. Tom Homan sat upright at the prosecution's table, his eyes calm but brimming with confidence. Grayson struck his gavel, his voice ringing. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies, the court delivers the following verdict. AOC inhaled, time seeming to slow. On the charge of threatening violence under Title 18, Section 875, the court finds insufficient evidence to convict Representative Ocasio-Cortez, as her statement lacked specific intent to threaten. A soft sigh of relief came from her supporters, but Grayson raised his hand. However, on the charge of obstructing law enforcement under Title 8, Section 1253, the court concludes that Representative Ocasio-Cortez's actions, including publicly instructing others to evade ICE, violated the law. She is fined $50,000 and referred to the House Ethics Committee for further investigation into conduct unbecoming of a congresswoman. The room erupted, shouts from protesters outside mingling with the audience's clamor. AOC bowed her head, her face pale, the prospect of an ethics investigation looming like a blade at her throat. Homan stood, shaking hands with Whitaker, a subtle smile on his lips, but his eyes blazing with victory. On X, his post appeared immediately. The law has spoken. Those who obstruct ICE will pay a price. Thank you, court, for making it clear. The post garnered tens of thousands of likes, with conservative users cheering, "Homan taught AOC a lesson." President Trump posted, "Big win for Tom Homan and America. AOC needs to leave Congress now." Outside the courthouse, AOC faced a sea of cameras and a chaotic crowd. Supporters held AOC as a hero signs, but they were drowned out by chants of "deport" from conservatives. In a brief press conference, AOC tried to keep her voice steady. "I will keep fighting for immigrant communities, for justice, despite these political attacks." But her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Homan appeared on Fox News that evening, welcomed as a hero. "This ruling sends a clear message. No one, not even a congresswoman, can obstruct the law," he declared. Conservative outlets like Newsmax and OAN predicted the ethics investigation would end AOC's career, portraying Homan as a tough man standing against radicalism. The case's legacy spread quickly. For Homan, the ruling solidified his standing in the Trump administration, paving the way for tougher immigration policies. He was lauded as the man who put AOC in her place. For AOC, the case deepened political polarization, making her a target. For conservatives, but strengthening loyalty among some progressive voters. However, the threat of an ethics investigation loomed over her 2028 election ambitions. Back in her Bronx office, AOC sat alone, staring out the window. "I let my emotions take over," she whispered, but her resolve still burned. Meanwhile, Homan, at a Washington event, was greeted with applause. His victory part of a larger movement. The trial between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Tom Homan reflects the deep political polarization and the media's role in shaping public perception in today's American society. AOC's courtroom outburst and social media posts show how emotions can damage one's image in a scrutinized environment, while Homan's calm demeanor and conservative media amplification illustrate the power of controlling one's narrative. The ruling, fining AOC and referring her to the House Ethics Committee, underscores that uncalculated actions can lead to lasting consequences in a polarized climate.